There are so many factors that impact the well-being of law enforcement officers, from wellness topics and developmental content to organizational expectations and social connections. RippleWorks solves that problem by providing anonymous check-ins, so each officer can get exactly what they need and want for prime performance, while agencies learn in real time how their people are doing through analytic dashboards. Take a look at RippleWorks today at www.rippleworks.com and schedule a demo. That's rippleworks.com. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about recruitment. And recruitment intersects with a lot of things. You know, I've said it like it might be like the consequence or kind of this indicator of culture and leadership. But we are talking specifically about recruitment from the agency perspective, like what organizations, what departments need to be doing. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I came from supervising our recruiting and hiring unit. And so that was an overwhelming amount of my life and kind of mind space in those critical years that we just have kind of been, well, some agencies are, you know, they have some traction. They're moving away from the post 2020 years and the impacts there. And a lot of us are still, you know, feeling the aftershock of that with recruiting and everything else. Today, I'm really excited to have a couple of guests. They are Tim and Tom. We have Tim Kucerovy. We have Tom Sai. We have people that are working and building and sharing voice and awareness and consulting in recruiting specifically. So a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about are not crazy earth-shattering, but hopefully they offer this perspective of what agencies might be doing missing the mark, or where they can potentially see some like really, really critical opportunities. So with that, Tim, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Hey, Eric. Thanks. Really appreciate. Really looking forward to having this conversation and kind of seeing the different perspectives that we got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, like, I've been connected with both of you guys for a while. Tim, we talked and we connected on some things like quite a while ago. I want to say maybe even closer to a year or somewhere around there. Talking about police culture, talking about training, and some other topics. And then Tom, you've been putting out a lot of great stuff on LinkedIn and social as well. So I am going to turn the mic over. Let's go so people can have some voice association, but also intro like a little quick dose of like who you are, your background with law enforcement, and like where you got into speaking on this critical topic. So let's start with Tim.
Yeah. So again, my name's Tim Kucerovy. About me a little bit is that I have a very non-traditional background. I started in non-traditional law enforcement. So park ranger with the National Park Service. I followed that, chased that golden carrot for the feds, trying to get that full-time, park ranger position. Ended up working seasonal for a few years. Then I transitioned to traditional law enforcement with a state agency in out west, where I was a trooper. So I went from being a park ranger, being on an ATV, flying around Denali National Park, to being stuck behind a wheel, driving 300 to 400 miles a day. Then, right, kind of leading to where I'm at today is I transitioned into higher education, where I oversaw a academic program for aspiring law enforcement officers, primarily in the non-traditional environment. But also what I saw was that students were looking to get into traditional law enforcement with their local departments. And within that, what I was responsible for and what I did was had to recruit these students, right? So if you think about recruiting for police officers, right, taking a step back down the supply chain and going into the students and getting them prepared was a big part of what I was doing. And then that led me to finishing my master's and really seeing an opportunity and start my own advisory consulting company to work with agencies to help them with recruitment, retention, and operations. And that's under Lumen Strategic Consulting.
Yeah, fantastic crash course, Tim. Thanks so much. So often we get stuck in our own swirl, and I'm sure we'll get into that. So, fantastic to have this outside critical eye with the hands-on acumen. I think that's a word you use in some of the notes we shared. But yeah, that cultural context, but also like from the academic sense, where you can get so much insight and perspective from a different walk. So, thank you, Tim. All right, Tom, over to you.
Yeah, my name is Tom Sy. I've been with the Glendale Police Department in Glendale, Arizona for 21 years, 20 sworn, retired last year, and came back as a volunteer, and now am a civilian employee handling marketing and recruiting for the agency. So the way I got into law enforcement, typical story really. Always wanted to be a cop since I was, knee high. My dad was a cop in South Florida for almost 30 years. And of course, he grew up telling me, no, you got to go do something else. You don't want to be chasing bad guys around the rest of your life. So I did. I had a whole separate career. I was a radio broadcaster and worked for some FM radio stations and minor league hockey teams across the country. And that's where I got into, in addition to my duties broadcasting, I was director of communications, director of media relations, and really got into marketing and learning how to put butts in the seats, as we like to call it, for these minor league teams. But back in 2004, I couldn't take I had to scratch the itch. I just couldn't take it anymore. So we were in Florida, my wife and I, and we were sick of hurricanes and it raining every day at 4 o'clock. So we said, hey, where doesn't it do that at? And we landed on Arizona and moved out here, and it's been great ever since. I've been in recruiting for 12 of my 21 years, running just about every single aspect of recruiting, from job openings to getting people in, doing background interviews, doing background investigations, the whole 9 yards. And then a few years ago in 2023, I also started my own company. I realized that agencies were kind of missing the boat on what I had learned during my time with my department. So I knew I had to step up and do something. And that's when I founded Four Cops Training, so I could get my message out to people to show them that recruiting in 2025 isn't hard. It's just different.
Yeah, no, thanks for running us through that. I like, speaking of recruiting and like advocates and like brand, but so frequently that's the thing, right? You have law
Yeah.
enforcement officers, moms and dads, uncles that are like, hey, yeah, don't do this job, which is like, it's kind of fascinating that we can still maintain that pipeline of legacy of professionals and officers despite that. But I love how I'm sure your parents loved how you entertained going a different route. But then a return home, almost like just coming back to what
Sure. Right.
what you knew, tried and true. So super cool. All right, so we kind of did this little crash course of like your guys' perspective. People know the credibility and where you're coming from doing the job, and also like being able to have critical insight as to like why you are putting out the information you're putting out. And we see so many headlines, and I think that anyone, if they're not driving right now, could look up like recruiting and pick their state and pick up like a different city or a large city, and you can literally find these headlines as to like what they're doing or what agencies might be citing as a reason why things aren't working. Like, is it bonuses? Is it cowboy hats? Is it tattoos and beards and vests? And like that becomes like its own meme. But I just want to kind of start off with like, I asked both Tim and Tom to kind of give us like their three main things that they really want to focus in on, because we could talk for hours and hours, but these principles, as I shared before, like they're not crazy earth shattering, but the application can be a little nuanced, and that's where it can be really helpful to work with someone externally. But yeah, let's go back to Tim. So number one, and I love this because this is what we talk about so much on the show, but you're talking about leadership. All right, why are you talking about leadership if we're talking about recruiting, Tim?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It comes down to culture, right? Every agency, every organization has a unique culture. And it starts with the leadership, right? And there's this policing is a very unique profession where it is institutionalized knowledge when you have folks that typically and historically never left one department. So you have this institutional knowledge that's being passed down, and it's whether it's good or bad, it's influencing the next generation of officers. And what we're seeing today is some of the ramifications of poor leadership, poor management that are now surfacing and impacting the recruitment and retention. And kind of going back to what Tom said about, you know, parents or dad was in, policing and said, don't join, right? Well, there had to be more, there's more to that story. And I hear that a lot, but that starts with the leadership at the top of recognizing that, hey, we have a problem and we need to address it. And so for me, that's a big point, and that's a very touchy subject because there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of, I don't want to look myself in the mirror and say that there's something wrong, right? Because then it
Mhm.
reflects poorly on me. Where if leaders take a moment to step back and look at the big picture and analyze and examine themselves and say, hey, is this truly what we are? That starts the snowball effect. And that's where we're seeing success with some agencies where they're not having the issue with recruitment retention, right? They took that honest, right? That honest look at themselves and decided to make a change. And so for me, that's why it is all about, first thing is leadership. You have to have the support, the buy-in from leadership, and the commitment. That's the big one, is commitment. It has to be 100% for any of these strategies or tactics to work and be successful and sustainable. You have to have buy-in from the top. So
Yeah.
that's why I say leadership is more about influence, in that. So
Yeah, it's we all know bosses and we all know like authority, but that doesn't necessarily mean influence. And I love how you focus in on ego. And so much of my perspective of strong leadership isn't having all the answers. Like, frankly, it's oftentimes saying, "Hey, I'm not the expert. Like, I'm the chief. I'm doing chief things, but I'm going to get out of the way and give some trust and give some power to the people that, hey, like you're my PIO. You're not a recruiter, but we need to revamp our recruiting thing. You know brand, you know comms, you know messaging. Let's give you the mic, right? Let's get a work group. Let's get, whether it's a specific unit or an outside trainer, right? A consultant. It is saying like, hey, we need something different, and then listening to your people, because if you're thinking about, everyone's thinking about it, right? Everyone's thinking about how the staffing looks and how the ranks are bare. It's affecting their day to day. It's affecting whether they can have time off and all these things that we need for, work life balance. So yeah, I love that, man. All right, Tom, any thoughts on that before we go to like your first prong?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Whenever I talk to chiefs, I always tell them, look, you don't need to be an expert in this stuff. You just have to have some sort of awareness and understanding of what's going on. I think a lot of times when I talk to agencies all over the country, most agencies can't remember the last time that their chief of police or somebody else from senior staff came down just to check on them, just to say, hey, how's everything going? You have everything you need? Not to ask about an applicant, not to see how many vacancies they had, just to see just a genuine, how's everybody? Are you okay? Can I get you anything? So the biggest thing on that topic I can urge is to just get involved. Again, you don't need to be an expert on things. Just have an awareness and some minor knowledge of what's going on. And I promise you, if agencies start doing just merely that small thing, that it costs you nothing, costs you $0 to go downstairs and be genuine and go into your recruiting unit. But if you start doing that, it's going to be, of course, everybody's going to look at you like you're, it's weird, like, oh my God, are we in trouble type of thing at first because it's been so long. But the more that you do it, the more that you go down, the more trust that you're going to gain. And I promise you that if you as the chief or the sheriff or whatever you are, the head of the agency, if you take those steps, people will run through a wall for you. Your recruiting unit will do unbelievable things.
Yeah. And that's so much of why we had success, was like the team. And it came from the top, right? It was like the senior bosses are like, hey, plot out the data. And somebody plotted out the data. Like, I was totally in a different unit and different role. And they did the math. They're like, man, at this rate, at the rate that we're hiring and not retaining, we're going to be caught up to full staffing in 18 years, but there's probably going to be a lot of growth. So we're not even compensating for that. We're like, okay, that is not satisfactory. We need to do something different, and started working with my commander at the time and trying to innovate and giving him the leeway, right? Like lengthening the leash to say, try things, like go. And then when I came onto the team, he's like, try things, go. I trust you, right? And then I was able to parlay that leadership influence culture down to my people, like recruiter. I'm like, hey, we need to get outside of the box. Let's try everything, throw it at the wall, right? And we're going to get
Right.
into some of that later. But then at the background, right? Like, let's look at what's working, what's not. And then to have that touch in from leadership, which I think there's a perfect transition to your first point, because what I hear you saying, Tom, is kind of another take on this piece that Tim put out, which is leadership is about influence. How do you build influence? Trust, relationship. And that's like the relationship within the team that's doing the hiring in the organization. But that was your first prong, right? Tom, you went to
Yeah.
relationship with the candidate, right? With the applicant. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, for me, it's paramount. I mean, recruiting at its core, right, is no different than it's really been. I don't care if it was the 1920s, the 1950s, the 80s, whenever it was. It has always been about, for attracting applicants to your agency, has always been about three things: meeting your applicants where they're at, building a relationship with them, and showing them that people like them work for you. For me, all three steps are important, but it's that second one that is just absolutely critical. I cannot tell you how many applicants that I've had sitting in my office that we're doing a background interview with, right? I'm just being friendly, learning about them. I'm genuinely interested in them. I'm genuinely excited for them to have this career, just like I did. I remember when I started back in 2004, how excited I was for the job. After all these years, I'm finally doing it. I think we lose touch of what we're really doing here sometimes as recruiters is we're changing lives. So it's that relationship building process is paramount. So to finish my thought, I can't tell you how many people have been sitting there and we get to the end of the interview and they're like, this was so much better than with the other agency. I'm just dropping out of there. And I'll try to tell them, "Hey, stay in as many processes as you can. You never know what's going to happen. We got a long way to go," but they just drop out right then and there. And it's because of that, that relationship building. And it starts from the moment that you reach out to an applicant, from the moment that you invite them to testing, and the language that you use when they show up to testing. Are you yelling at them, run over here, do this, line up over there? Or are you laughing and joking with them when they come in? So I really think this is an area that agencies can, again, drastically improve on. It costs you nothing to do it. And it creates big results.
Yeah, you hit on a few things, which is like you're giving them a peek into something that oftentimes, unless they know, like family or close friends, people don't know about, like police
No.
work, right? They just know what they perceive, and that's through the media, that's through movies and TV. And so when you give them that first email, that first call, that first invite, the tour in the station, like they are
Yeah.
soaking in all of this. You're like, this is police culture, right? This is agency X culture. And so you are literally controlling that. And then the person that you put them in a car with is controlling that. The people in the hallway are influencing that, right? So to be very mindful of that, and you get to choose that. But also, it's like, don't polish the turd. I think this goes back to earlier prong, which is leadership.
Right.
How is that shaping culture?
Right.
Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think, like Tom said, it's the simple things, right? But they take the most time and effort is that relationship and hitting on it, right? I recruiting for students, candidates, and working with and seeing agencies come into a classroom and try to recruit when they have a room of, I would have give agencies, for example, like a room of 30 to 50 students all signed up wanting to be cops at whatever level, right? The recruiter, the officer would come in and they'd just be blah blah blah, out in the hallway saying, "Hey, this sucks. I'm here. I worked last night and then I was forced to be here," right? And not really sharing anything. But I think what happens is that we become complacent because the police job, we understand it, we've done it. But for somebody new who's only seen it on TV, man, they want to talk about, the equipment that you have. One of the first things people ask is, how fast have you ever driven a car, right? When you think about that, or what's the coolest, story that you got? And we're like, well, that's just a normal day for us. But as a recruiter, you have to realize they don't understand that. And you have to put on, it takes a lot of effort to do recruiting, to be genuine with these relationship development and building those relationships. You should be more tired after a recruiting event than working a normal 10-hour shift.
Mm-hmm.
You should be. If you're not, you did not do something right. So I truly believe that, yeah, the relationships are key to the success of an agency and their recruitment.
Yeah, no, I love that point. And you just had this post on your LinkedIn at the time this we're recording. It's September 5th. So for those that want to scroll back, look at all both of their pages. There's lots of great stuff. Like just even if you're not in recruiting, like nudge your person, right? Your recruiting or your public engagement or whatever. Like say, hey, check out this stuff, and like it gets some gears turning. But it is a post about the engaged recruiter and the disengaged recruiter, essentially, right? And then there's an image there. Man, you're taking me right back to like a college campus where one, people told me, don't go to college campuses. It's a waste of time. We tried it. Don't go out in person. Do it all online. And that wasn't working for them. So I wasn't going to listen. Like I was like, I'll do it all. We'll build our social. We'll get scrappy. And that's Tom's next thing. So a little peek there. But well, let's just go, right? But then I remember my recruiter and I, like we're at a campus and we are meeting a lot of people. We're walking around. We're not even at our table anymore. Like one of us would try to hold it down just to like get like some name recognition in case someone came by to look at the swag as you do. But then kind of hovering like around the front of the table, and we're walking over there. We're talking to the campus cops, just chumming it up, not trying to poach or anything, but just like chatting, right? Just engage with the room. You're just connected. You're electric, and it is exhausting, especially if you're not this overt extrovert. Meanwhile, man, I look at I can picture him now, and I won't say who, but what agency locally, but it was like the guy is just almost like on a throne. He's on his like throne of recruitment behind the table. He's got all his mugs and swag and like keychains and stuff on the table, and he's like, come to me, and he's like sitting back, and I was like, that's not it. Like that's not the thing. And you are testing both ways. Like the applicants should be showing up, they should be polished, business casual or better, right? Likewise, you should be cleaned up, you should be lit up, you should be ready to engage. So, thank you for covering that. And then we'll just pivot back to Tom. So like we're gonna switch the order. Tom, your second prong. My word was kind of scrappy, thrifty, but it doesn't cost a lot to do these things, right? It doesn't cost anything to turn it up. It costs your energy, but you should really care and do it.
Right, right. Absolutely. One of the things that drove me to doing this too was watching these agencies spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these. Here, we'll give you a website, a fancy marketing slogan, and it's, we'll put out a recruitment video for you. And it's just like, my goodness, this is insane to me. But, I think before I get into the one that I want to talk about here with this point about being free and where you can use things, is I think it's important because I'm huge on social media, as I'm gonna cue you in here in a minute for. But when people ask me, you're like, what do I need to be doing? And the answer is simple: everything that you can possibly handle, you should be doing. Marketing is one big giant experiment, as I learned when I was working for hockey teams and trying to do things. I brought that same concept to police recruiting, and it really is. What works at one place may not work at another. And to your point about the job fairs where they said, don't go to them, and then you found that it does work. I find that job fairs are excellent for brand building. And I end up getting more referrals from the person at the booth right next to me than I do anybody coming up. So with that being said,
law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency and revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204.
Yeah, recruiting, you don't need to spend a ton of money on recruiting solutions. It's that simple. I think a lot of times agencies they're chasing this concept of we got to fill our vacancies, or worse, we got to get to zero vacancies. And they're throwing everything and anything at, money wise, at whatever somebody sold them on or what they sold somebody. See things, or they see somebody that bought something, so they try to get in on that too, when the answer is right there in front of their face. So a lot of times when I see agencies, they'll make a post on LinkedIn or on Facebook or whatever. Typically on LinkedIn, it's like, oh, we can't find anybody. Nobody wants to do this job anymore. All the old, sayings that everybody has. The first thing that I do every single time is I visit Instagram and I see if they have an account. And 99% of the time, they don't have an Instagram account. So why is that important? Well, it's only the biggest social media platform for Generation Z people. They're on there all the time. So to me, social media is absolutely the recruiting table of 2025 and beyond. It's where all these events from the past were, recruiting events, and I'm not discounting them. Again, don't mistake what I'm saying, but recruiting events have been a staple in police recruiting for as long as anybody can remember, right? But it's just, guess what? Your applicants aren't there. They're on social media all the time. Like, just take a look around, at the grocery store. They're standing there on the checkout line. They're scrolling. They're driving with one knee, scrolling social media with the other. It's just where they're at. The average Generation Z social media user visits 6 different social media platforms per day. So if you want to reach people in that target audience, which is, again, Gen Z, is going to make up the bulk of your applicants in today and in the not so distant future for the next 5 or 6 years. It's going to be primarily made up of Gen Z. And if you want to reach them, you got to be where they're at. Much to what I was talking about with the 3 steps is you got to meet them where they're at, and that is on social media. Every social media platform in the world has a free option. Yes. Is there alternatives to run ads? Sure. Could you? Yes. Do you need to? No, you absolutely do not. Like I told you, when I retired last year, between August of 24 and August of 2025, I was just recruiting. So I was just coming in, maintaining our social media 8 or 10 hours a week. That's all I was doing, running no ads, doing nothing. We hired plenty of people. We had applicants every single month coming in, showing up for testing. It's all about just getting out there and building that relationship, just in a different format.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of things. And before I go back over to Tim on his thoughts on that, a couple things like really scream out to me. One is that it's not just like the showing up at a fair, but connected to social media. We got so many people in Chiefs interviews saying, I mean, you guys are everywhere. Clearly you're hiring. So like they weren't going to the fairs, but they were seeing us post about going to the fairs, right? And then one of the things that makes it hard for people that are really data driven, they're like, well, we went to that fair, we got like 2 names on a clipboard. I think we like kind of bribed them, like with stuff, like they didn't seem that interested. And like, okay, that's okay, because we were also internally saying like recruiting is community engagement. And so the community engagement team that was just tapped, they're doing like apartment complex, like problems and this and that. Staffing sucked everywhere. And like, hey, we will take on that role because it's like, it's a dual, it's a dual-headed dragon. Like we're going to hit both ends. At the same time, like it had that dual purpose where if you're out and about, you post about how you're out and about, and you have, posts and you have some engagement. So people have a landing page, and it doesn't matter how many likes, it just matters people can find you if they want to find you. You said the other thing earlier, which is that like, yeah, you can hire a company, a media company or whatever, because there are there's organizations and companies that care, and they come from this background. They like really care about public safety and all that. But you also have everyone seeing a problem and seeing the dollars behind it. And I had a local media outlet reach out saying, hey, we do broadcasts, we do this, my family's from police stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like he's going to like kind of try to throw us a bone or work a deal. Man, that bill for like a radio advertisement, which like I don't listen to the radio. I think if you listen to sports these days, you listen to the radio, but otherwise, sorry, not trying to knock it, and I'm not going to say what outlet, but it became clearly about money because the prices were crazy, man. Like to run like a 30-second ad or so many segments per week or what have you, and trying to like basically just toggle this thing. Like they tried to draw me in with like, hey, LE family. And I was like, no, I'm not feeling it. At the same time, like online media, okay, cool. If that's the thing, and building you a page, man, we built a page, just building a page as you do. And I've seen a lot of smaller agencies with strained budgets where they built a page, they managed it, people can reach out, they can respond back within a day, which is highly critical. Or you pay a company like 20, 50 grand, 100, 200 grand. What does that get you? A sweet video that maybe no one sees.
Right.
Maybe they see it, but they're not flipping into applicants because no one's returning their Instagram messages. Right. So I'm going to set the mic down. I'm going to pass it over to Tim on that.
Oh man, you guys just hit a lot, and let me see if I can kind of add some key points or just add some to it is I love what I love is when I hear an agency say, "Oh, we go to, you know, X, Y, and Z recruiting events." One of the first things I ask them is, "Okay, what was your objective of going to that event?" And Eric, you kind of hit on it was, "Okay, are we doing more are we going into it as a dual purpose of is it the community policing or community involvement aspect, or are we going there solely for the objective to get applicants?" And that's where the struggle with agencies is that they don't differentiate. And then they say, well, we have to go to 100 recruiting events. Well, you don't. If you have the right mindset and you put the objectives out there that, hey, this is what we're looking for. Are we there to get a set number of candidates? Or, hey, do we need to branch out and be a presence, show our brand, be out there, be in the community? Okay, well, that serves a different purpose. And you can do both at the same time, but so much is just focused on did we get applicants? Did we get any return on the investment, so to speak, as far as sending 2 or 3 officers to a recruiting event? That's a 6, 8 hour day for most agencies.
Mhm.
Those are people that are off the street, especially if your department doesn't have a specific recruiting team or unit that's not taking calls for service. And then what happens is that you have the same people, right? For the longest time, it was, females that are being highlighted on posters, right? To target that demographic, right? And so we're seeing a flip of we're just going to throw everything at the sun and see what sticks. Where if you look at it from a strategic point of view and okay, yeah, that college career fair is in an area where, you know what, we want to develop stronger relationships with that demographic, that age group, whatever. Okay, let's do that, and then we can spin the recruitment side. Or what are we doing, right?
Yes, I did say earlier, like, we tried everything under the sun, and Tom's like, "Do something, actually do everything." And that was part of our strategy, so we could learn the landscape and then figure out what's working and then lean into those things, right? And so, I mean, you already said it, strategy, and maybe and if your thought comes back, come back, but
Yeah.
your second prong is, like, strategy over tactics, and can you kinda explain that? And then I think that the listenership will get that, like, "Oh, okay, like, we're just trying, like, 100 or 200 tactics, just throwing it at cool, that could be, like, a considerable thing. The strategy may come with, like, discerning and seeing what's working and why it's working or why it's not working, and then going back to the playbook."
Yeah, no, thanks. And yeah, hopefully it comes back to me here. But what I mean by that is that the policing profession are tacticians, experts in tactics, right? Solve a problem, get a result, success or failure, right? Where the failure comes from is the long-term strategy vision, right? I want field officers or even leaders that are listening today to ask their management what their strategy is for their agency, or ask a field officer what the strategy is for the department. Where are we going? How are we getting there? In vast majority of the time, from my experience, what I see is that what the field officer says is completely different than what the management is saying, right? They're not aligned on the same strategy and they don't know how to get to the same one. So there's the communication breakdown. The tactics, right? The job fairs, the actual activities that you're doing, the sign-on bonuses, right? The social medias. What's interesting that I'm seeing is that these sign-on bonuses aren't having the effect that agencies were hoping for, right? And
Mhm.
one thing is that agencies are looking for this magic bullet, the silver bullet. And kind of going back to it now, I recall is that agencies are kind of being sucked into companies, organizations that are advertising the silver bullet to solve their problem, right? There is no silver bullet for each
Mhm.
agency. There's not a general one. Each agency is going to have to attack their challenge in their own unique way. A job, even on social media, we can see today, right? The job flyers, you can pull up 5 or 6 different agencies across the country. They all say the same thing: benefits, take home vehicle, sign on bonus,
Specialty units. It's all the yeah,
specialty units, right?
yeah.
Like, there are probably some agencies out there that are high octane 24/7, but the vast majority of police agencies are not high octane 24/7, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the way I look at it is you have to think about it in a perspective of, okay, build that pipeline, right, of the candidates that you want. You create this ideal candidate profile of who you want for your agency, what you're looking for, attributes, all of that, right? You shape the agency culture, and then you have to align recruitment with retention because you don't have recruitment without retention and vice versa. And so the tactics, right, the way I see it is the busy work, where if you don't have a written down strategy that is easily digestible and understandable, that I can't say, hey, this is the strategy in 10 seconds to somebody that's in the department, you don't really have a strategy. You just have a wish list of, ideal goals or lofty ideas that you're looking for.
Absolutely,
So
man. Yeah. So well said. And yeah, just to go back to that, like tactics, we are expert problem solvers, insert short-term problem solvers, right? And so
absolutely.
if you are responding to a burglary in progress, you will employ all these tactics and tools to effect the safe containment and arrest of said burglar. Job done. I mean, like the owner gets there, you give him a business card, the glass is still broken, but you're like, peace out, I did my part, right? But then if you talk about strategy, then it's not just like crime prevention. It's not just, hey man, you got no cameras, you got these hedges out of control. Oh, you got burgled like 3 times, but you didn't have an alarm that was calling us. The alarm just called you and it didn't wake you up. Let's talk about some like longer term solutions. And like, hey, what's going on with this business park? Like, you talking to other things? Because we have like a couple other people in this business park. They're part of this neighborhood watch kind of thing, or community watch, or they're on the Ring app and they kind of interact and they share intel between each other. And then you're part of this greater thing. You're affecting crime, public safety in the area long term, right? And you went to, strategy, right? What is the strategic plan? So the strategic plan for hiring is so much more nuanced. It's so far reaching, long forecast. It's usually like over a year, maybe 2 to 5 years. Some of these leaders they're talking about in their meetings 10 years from now, like where the agency is going to be. The projected growth of the city means we will need to increase services, meaning we need technology, we need staffing, we need fleet. Like, that's a lot for, like my sergeant brain, and like in some ways like my commander brain right now. Like, that's a lot that the big bosses are doing. And so it is to say, like, when you're doing recruiting, right, when you're doing this thing, like, it's not just recruiting, but it is so much of culture, right? Like, recognizing what are you putting out there, and brand is part of that. So I love that discussion, because you brought up one of my biggest pet peeves as we were starting recruiting was you'd stand up at a test event, and we kind of had this, like, in Washington, it's like all these agencies use this private company, and you could send a recruiter and kind of give your spiel. But I was like, everyone's saying the same thing. We need to not do that. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.